This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive exclusive perks. Link in the description.
The fat controller sat in his office, hard at work, when he heard a knock at the door.
Oh, bother. Come in. Sir? Ah, hello, Inspector. What can I do for you?
The engine you purchased from Scotland has arrived, sir.
Ah, excellent. Right on time. Where is he?
They're waiting in the yard for you, sir.
Good. They?
Yes, sir. There's 2 engines.
2 engines, Inspector?
Yes, sir.
We only ordered 1 engine. Send the other one back.
Right. Certainly, sir. But, which one?
Engines have numbers, Inspector. We bought number 57646. So send the other one back.
Quite so, sir, but, there is a, complication.
Excuse me?
The engines are exactly alike, sir, and they don't have numbers. They said they lost them on the way.
Lost them on the way? Engines can't lose numbers, Inspector. They're painted on.
Yes, sir, of course, but they arrived without them.
Is this a joke?
No, sir,
I get it. You're trying to put me on. You almost had me there, Inspector. Who put you up to this? Wasn't Loam? He's right outside the door, isn't he? Loam, you rascal, get in here.
No, sir, this isn't a joke. The engines really don't have numbers.
I see. Well, we'll just have to settle this nonsense then. Come on.
The 2 engines greeted him cheerfully.
Morning, sir.
Greetings. So, I hear you 2 have lost your numbers. How did that happen?
They must have slyly slipped off, sir.
Aye, you know how it is.
I know. Accidentally. On purpose.
Oh, sir, you wouldn't be thinking we lost them on purpose, would you now?
Well, I'm not so sure. Numbers are painted on. They don't just get lost now, do they? So, which one of you is 57646?
Well, we've had lots of numbers over the years, sir. Neither of us know which we ended up with.
Aye, we cannot see our cabsides after all.
I see. What are your names?
Donald, sir.
And Douglas, sir.
Good. Now we're getting somewhere. Your controller can tell me which of you is which.
Oh, you'll get nae muckle help from him, sir.
Why?
He doesn't know our names. How could he? We've only given ourselves names when we lost our numbers.
Inspector?
Yes, sir?
Give these engines numbers 9 and 10 and put them to work.
Right, sir?
Ooh.
Aye.
Now listen here. If I'm to have an extra engine on my railway, then I expect double the output. One of you is playing truant, and I will find him out and send him home. Good day.
Donald and Douglas are practical, peppery, and proud. These identical twin engines come from Scotland, and if you didn't know that, you certainly would immediately upon meeting them. Donald and Douglas are the Northwestern Railway's workhorses. They can often be found hauling heavy goods trains across the island of Sodor to the mainland. But when they're not pulling trains, they can be found clearing the tracks of snow, or rescuing a fellow engine from the scrapyard, or enjoying bonding time with their pet duck, or even maybe trying to get everyone to sing a jaunty tune with them. I have been so looking forward to covering Donald and Douglas in Sodor's finest. They're ones that I've wanted to cover from the start. These 2 are special characters in this series. They're certainly fan favorites, and I want to make sure that I do them justice here. And with that pretty crazy recent reveal that apparently that they're both going to be in All Engines Go, I'm actually flabbergasted by that news. Like, wow, them, of all characters? Really? now seemed like a good as time as any to finally tell their story. Let's travel back in time about 64 or so years to 1960, where the world met the Scottish twin engines for the very first time. Donald and Douglas made their grand debut in Book 15, The Twin Engines. In 1959, the workload on Sodor was becoming too much for the current fleet. More and more people were coming and going to the island, and it was clear to Sir Charles Hatt that another engine was needed. He ordered a goods engine, and British Railways decided to transfer number 57646 from the Scottish region to Sodor upon his request. To Hatt's shock, 2 engines arrived, numbers 57646 and 57647. Both had conveniently somehow lost their numbers on the way to Sodor, so Hatt nor anyone else was able to tell which was the one that was ordered.
I hear you've lost your numbers. How did that happen? Raymond has slyly slipped it off, sir. You ken who it is.
As the controllers on the mainland never named the engines of their class, the twins had decided to name themselves Donald and Douglas.
What are your names? Donald and Dougie, sir. Then your controller can tell me which of you is which. Och, you'll no get muckle help for him, sir. He doesna ken our names, sir. Who could he? We only gin ourselves names when we lost our numbers.
After some back and forth and getting nowhere, Hatt decided to trial both engines, and gave each temporary numbers, 9 and 10, respectively. He was determined to figure out their game, and once he found out who was who, would send the other back. Donald and Douglas came from the real-life Caledonian Railway in Scotland. They are both 812 class tender engines, the first of which was built in 1899 at St. Rollick's Works in Glasgow. These were powerful 060s, built to haul goods, and also passengers if necessary. 79 of these existed in total, making them the most numerous class of engine on the Caledonian. The first 17 812s were fitted with air brakes for passenger work, and these ones received the Caledonian's royal blue livery. Only a single example was preserved, number 828, and it is one of these original 17. It can be found today at the Strathspey Railway in Aviemore, Scotland. Donald and Douglas's numbers, however, tell us a bit more about their origins. In 1908, an additional 17 locomotives were built, with some minute detail differences. These new locomotives were called the 652 class, and they were virtually identical to the 812s. Under nationalization, they were all renumbered, with the final one, built in 1909, receiving the number 57645. Donald and Douglas left the Scottish region with the BR numbers 57646 and 57647. These are fictional add-ons, and would place them at the tail end of the 652 subclass, and indicate that they were likely built in 1909. As 652s, they would have only been painted black their entire working lives, and never would have worn the Caledonian's blue livery. They even confirmed this later on in the Chris Audrey era.
The engines in our old line used to be blue, remember Donald. Dougie and me never were though, we had to be black.
How 2 engines arrived on Sodor without explanation is revealed in the book's next story, The Missing Coach.
I hope the Fat Controller doesna find out I shouldna be here. I couldna abide going back.
Douglas stowed away to Sodor with Donald. It was 1959, and during this time steam was well into being phased out on the railways in Britain. Once an engine's boiler ticket expired, it was straight to the cutter's torch, with a new diesel ready to replace them. Anxious that he'd suffer the same fate, Douglas conspired with Donald to hide their true identities, and played dumb to bemuse the Fat Controller, just long enough till they won him over. It wasn't a great plan, but, to be fair, what other options did he have? Either stay on the mainland where he'd definitely get cut up, or at least try to make a run for Sodor and see what happens. What follows in the book are a series of mishaps and incidents that made the Fat Controller go back and forth on which engine was the least troublesome to him. Douglas accidentally shunts away Thomas's special coach in a siding with the passengers still inside it. Donald backs into a signal box, and Douglas accidentally destroys a brake van. All these were accidents, of course. But by the end of it all, the Fat Controller was left with a tough decision to make, and Donald and Douglas were left in utter suspense. Some time passes, and by the time winter comes, all the other engines have been made aware of Donald and Douglas's plight. They all come together to save the two once and for all. By suggestion from Edward, they send a deputation to speak to the Fat Controller on all of their behalf. In the end, the Fat Controller makes the right decision and decides to keep both engines on his railway.
Thank you, sir. Does this mean that they're both of us? The Fat Controller smiled. It means... But the rest of his speech was drowned in a delighted chorus of cheers and whistles.
The book ends with the twins getting new blue paint, which is a nice little in-joke reference to the fact that they specifically would never have worn it on the Caledonian.
What color paint would you like? Blue, sir, please.
I love how they both chose blue immediately, like it's something that they've always desired forever, reinforced by what they say later on in the Chris era.
The engines in our old line used to be blue. Dougie and me never wear though. Say blue makes a nice change.
It's these little intricacies that make me love the Railway series so much. Clearly written by someone who really knew his stuff about trains, and worked even the most minute details into the characters' personalities and desires. They do briefly return to their black liveries in the companion book, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree, which was written as a tie-in with the TV series at the time. So, Chris Audrey opted to have them illustrated in the colors that they appear in on screen. Now, I'm not sure if them being black here is considered canon, but you could just hand-wave it and say they got new liveries after their last overhaul or something. Maybe they alternate between the two. It's not uncommon for engines to change up their liveries on railways in real life, after all. The Twin Engines is an interesting book. I'd say it's one of the funnier books of the Railway series. The way the whole ruse goes down is comical. It's almost farce-like. The Fat Controller's utter confusion when he first hears that two engines have arrived is almost something out of a sitcom routine.
Then send the other back at once. Certainly, sir. But which? The Fat Controller stared again. Engines have numbers, Inspector, he explained patiently.
This book finds a way to include all the main characters and have each of them do something important. Every main, with the exception of Toby, who knows what he was up to during all this, play a role of significance. Duck is the first to befriend the twins and shows them around. Thomas's coach is the one that goes missing. James hauls the train, of which Douglas destroys the brake van. Gordon and Henry ridicule them behind their backs, and later have a change of heart and participate in the deputation to save them. Gordon sort of leads the deputation. Henry is rescued by them in the snow. Percy is the one who speaks to the Fat Controller on everyone's behalf, and Edward is the one to suggest the deputation to save them. Everyone plays a role in this, and the twins having interactions with nearly everyone in their first outing makes them feel naturally a part of the main cast by the book's end. I also find the Twin Engines fascinating, for I think it's the first and possibly the only time of the series where the Fat Controller is depicted as the main antagonist. He's not the only villain here. There's also the spiteful brake van, and Gordon and Henry are pretty despicable at one point. But the Fat Controller is the overall antagonist, the big looming threat. He's not evil or anything, and he's completely sensible throughout this. But he is the force working against our protagonist's goals. He is the major block in them both staying on Sodor together. And I just find that so interesting. Usually the Fat Controller is the sympathetic father figure type, stern but fair. But here, he's down to business. He's so ruthless. But even he has an arc, for after coming to understand all the engine's feelings on the matter, decides to forget the ruse and keeps both twins together. A good father does what's best for his children, after all. So, that's their origins. What are their characters? Donald and Douglas are very conspicuous types. When someone mistreats them, they are ready to throw hands. They confront Gordon and Henry immediately when they tease them. Donald confronts the spiteful brake van and shows him who's boss, etc. They're not calculated like Duck, per se, who would, for example, plan a protest to out his oppressors, or will step back and watch their mistreaters fall to their comeuppance like Toby. No, Donald and Douglas will just go all in, guns blazing.
Spite Ducky, would ya? Take that! Oh, ow, ow! There's mair coming, sin ye misbehave.
They are very speak-as-they-feel and hide-nothing types. I guess we can chalk that up to the Scottish in them. But at the same time, they're very hearty characters that can get along with anyone. They love a good laugh and can hold their own in a match of wits.
I heard tell about an engine and some tar wagons. Shut up, said James. It's not funny. Surely, James, it wasna you. You dinna say.
They tend to be the loudest ones in a crowd. When someone bids farewell, they will be the ones to break out in song.
This announcement was greeted with cheers, and Flying Scotsman departed to the strains of Will You No Come Back Again, led, as one might expect, by Donald and Douglas. All the engines who could came to see him off. Donald and Douglas made everyone sing Auld Lang Syne, and then Stepney and his controller puffed off to a chorus of cheers and whistles.
I just picture these two loud Scottish guys singing together in arms, totally off-key, like they're in a pub or something. And they're just so enthusiastic and infectious that everyone can't help but laugh and join in. They have the uncanny ability to bring all the engines, regardless of class, down to the same level to have a good time. Now, as lovable as these two spirited Scotsmen are, they also have their demons. They had a particular disdain for diesels that took them quite a while to fully get over.
If I hadn't escaped, I'd have been cut up too. It's all because of yon diesels. They're all devils.
It is understandable. They witnessed firsthand on the mainland the fates of their friends and colleagues. It makes sense why they'd hold a grudge at what sent them to the scrappers in the first place. Hence why the moment that they finally accepted Boko way later on hold some weight.
Donald and Douglas were the last to accept him, and the other day they were heard to remark, "For a diesel, yon Boko's nae such a bad sort of engine." That, from the Caledonian twins, is high praise indeed.
Since they come from the mainland and often visit it with their goods trains, Donald and Douglas are often effectively used as a way to bring up the real-life happenings of the current world into the series. That knowledge of engines on the mainland being scrapped wasn't very common on Sodor until they arrived, for instance, or how they were the ones to bring about the talks of high-speed trains in Book 31. They are the series' eyes into the present world, and the ones that vessel that knowledge back to Sodor, and thus the audience. Knowledge from their past world can affect the trajectory of stories too. An example of this would be Jock. Douglas names the new miniature engine Jock, for his yellow undercoat reminded him of the engines on the fellow Highland Railway back in his Caledonian days, which were nicknamed Jocks. They're pretty useful characters in this regard, the perfect tools for when the author needs a character to deliver some exposition to kick off a story, or just drop some worldly knowledge. You also have characters like Duck for this too, and the others to varying extents. But Duck's perspective tends to be more limited, and usually positive and in relation to his Great Western roots. Donald and Douglas traveled all over, and their tenure on the mainland ended on a dour note, so you have way more free reign with them. Now, Donald and Douglas may be twins and look identical, but exactly the same they are not. Something I really appreciate about these two is that each of them are their own individual characters. In fact, following their intro book, there's only a sparse number of times that the two are actually illustrated together. More often than not, we see each of them by themselves. They are each their own engines, capable of performing tasks on their own, and both have proven they are able to carry their own stories. Donald is the more jokey one of the two. This is highlighted in Donald's Duck from Book 24. Donald is rude to Duck one night.
"I'm Great Western and quack, quack, quack." "What? You heard. Quack, quack you go, sin you'd an egg laid. Now wee'st and let an engine sleep."
So, Duck and his crew get back at him by placing a duckling in his tender. Donald's response to this? A hearty laugh.
Donald laughed. "No doubt that who's behind this," he said.
And he even ends up befriending it. He and his crew even continue the gag by placing an egg under Duck one night.
"D'ye mind what I said, Duck? You must ha' laid it in this night, all unbeknownst."
While never confirmed anywhere as far as I know, I've always suspected that this story exists purely because Wilbert Awdry wanted to somehow cheekily incorporate the name Donald Duck into the title of a story. Clever one, Wilbert. Douglas, meanwhile, is the more serious of the two, and the sympathetic one. He has the greater story, which is a full complete arc that spans multiple books. Douglas stowed away to Sodor with Donald, and several years later got his chance to return the favor. In Book 23's Escape, Douglas comes across a scared engine called Oliver hiding in the shadows of the yard at Barrow-in-Furness. He explains that they ran away from their home in the western region to flee scrapping, in attempt to make it to the safe haven of Sodor. They made it as far as Barrow before running out of coal. Douglas, remembering his own efforts to escape scrap, relates to Oliver's plight on a personal level, and offers to aid him the rest of the way.
Is it from scrap you're escaping? Yes. Then it's glad I'll be to help you, but we maun work first.
Together, they fool the yard inspector into thinking Oliver is being taken away for scrap, and the duo escape the yard to the safety of Sodor. Donald rescued Douglas, and Douglas rescued Oliver. It all came full circle.
Yon's an enterprising engine, he thought. I won away here with Donald, but I'd have been feared to do it on my own.
Donald and Douglas are the workhorses of Sodor. What they represent in this series are the common folk, the working class. They have a worldly perspective that most of the others that have blissfully lived nearly their whole lives on Sodor don't have. They are hardened men who went through hardship. They witnessed some pretty horrific stuff during their final years on the mainland, but they don't let that keep them down. They still laugh, they still smile, and get others to smile with them. They played the greatest gamble of all, stowing away to Sodor, and it paid off in the end. Their story teaches a great lesson. Nothing is more important than your family. You do what you can to save those you love, no matter the risk, and that a little compassion goes a long way. Either we both will win, or we both will go down trying.
Every day, Gordon steamed into the big station with the express. At the end of the train was a special coach for passengers travelling to places on Thomas's branch line. When the coaches are taken away, engines have to remember to shunt the special coach into the bay platform. It doesn't wait there long, for Thomas, with Annie and Clarabelle, comes running from the junction to collect it. Thomas is very proud of his special coach. One afternoon, Douglas was looking after the yard while Duck was away. Gordon arrived with the express.
Coaches, please.
On my way.
He was enjoying himself when an awful thought struck him.
I hope the fat controller doesn't find out I shouldn't be here. Oh, I couldn't abide going back. Not with what's happening over there.
Douglas worried so much over this that he forgot about Thomas's special coach.
Where is it? Where is it?
Huh? What's all this?
Where's my coach?
Coach? What coach?
My special coach. The one that Gordon brings for me. It's gone. I must find it. Can't talk.
Lost sakes, Donny. I must have stowed away the special coach with the empties. Maybe I can...
Too late, Dougie. Do you see that?
The twins looked in horror as a mob of angry passengers erupted from the siding.
They're complaining to the fat controller. No doubt he'll be coming here next.
Oh no! The fat controller will send me away if he finds out it was my doing. What are we going to do?
Hold your wish, Dougie. Listen, I have an idea. Now do as I say.
Donald and Douglas made their television debuts in Season 2's Break Van, and I think it's fair to say that their intro to the show got a bit botched. Now, most of us are familiar with what happened here. The original plan for their story arc was to combine the stories Hello Twins and The Missing Coach from their book into one episode, which would kick off a 3-part arc: The Missing Coach, Break Van, and The Deputation. However, The Missing Coach was midway through production when show creator Britt Allcroft decided to scrap the episode, her reasoning being that the story was confusing and lacked action. The once 4-parter in the book now became a somewhat rushed 2-parter, quickly introducing Donald and Douglas to the audience at the beginning of Break Van. Several photos from the cancelled episode have surfaced online over the years, revealing much of how this adaptation was planned to go down. I'm going to use this as a segue now to talk about the original story itself and clarify Allcroft's stance. The details occur as follows. Donald and Douglas arrive. They claim to have lost their numbers, so the Fat Controller numbers them 9 and 10 on their tenders, but he does not, however, give them nameplates. It's revealed later in the episode that Douglas was the stowaway and worries about being found out. He accidentally shunts away Thomas's special coach with the others, and this causes a ruckus. Douglas fears being found out and sent back, so he and Donald conspire. The two switch tenders, and Donald, pretending to be Douglas, runs off with the goods train, while Douglas, with Donald's tender, stays behind and plays dumb. The Fat Controller cannot be fooled though, and finds Douglas out. I think the confusion comes with why the two felt the need to switch tenders at all to accomplish this. The goal here was simply to just confuse the Fat Controller, so we couldn't trace the blame back to either one of them. At least, that's my assessment of this. I get disconnecting the tender, that was number 9's alibi for why he couldn't have been the one to shunt the coach away, but they ultimately didn't need to switch tenders to accomplish this, right? Donald didn't have to pretend to be number 10 to leave with the goods train. Douglas could have just left, and vice versa, right? That's all the Fat Controller would have seen from his perspective. He can't tell the two apart anyway. Not to mention, Thomas's special coach is never seen nor mentioned ever again, which is just another layer added on top of all this. I completely get where Allcroft was coming from. This is a pretty confusing story. However, its removal is unfortunate, for it greatly detracts from the twins' arc. The missing coach played a substantial part in Douglas's arc, specifically the scene where it's revealed that he was the stowaway. Without that information known, the tension in the final 2-parter is notably subdued. The stakes feel a lot lower. Instead of this rising fear of the Fat Controller discovering the truth about Douglas, it instead from the very start is more of a vaguer, oh no, which one will get sent back kind of thing.
The Fat Controller had given them numbers, but he was still planning to send one engine home.
Their ultimate fear of the scrapyard does still get a mention, albeit quickly, by Percy here.
They say, sir, that if you send them away, sir, they'll be turned into scrap, sir.
Now that is not to say that there isn't still merit to the Donald and Douglas 2-parter. I definitely still enjoy it. And as a kid, I had no clue that something was cut here. But, knowing all of this information now, in retrospect, it's definitely apparent that something is missing when rewatching the episodes. And it's kinda trippy thinking how this shot of Thomas passing the camera, and then the slow zoom in on the brake van, was likely meant to be the opening shot of Break Van. One of the biggest and longest lasting diverges from the original book is that Donald and Douglas never get repainted blue at the end. In the TV series, the two consistently continued to wear their BR black, and this was likely done to make them stand out a bit from the already existing 3 other blue main characters at the time. Personally, I'm a bit torn on this. I think the black definitely makes them stand out more, but there is something really satisfying seeing the twins get to wear the color that they've always wanted. I think, character-wise, the blue means more. Funnily enough though, the blue paint is used in various other media tied with the TV series, notably the story library books. This is so trippy, seeing the TV versions of the twins in blue, especially in stories that are based on TV-exclusive episodes. It's a weird little blend of both worlds here. I also feel I'd be doing the twins a disservice by not mentioning their amazing theme music by Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell. This music is tied to these two. Everyone always thinks of that triumphant bagpipe fanfare at the start when they think Donald and Douglas. Their theme sounds like a march, which is pretty fitting. A march might make one think of pride and order, standing together, unity. And that's Donald and Douglas's story in a nutshell. One would never abandon the other, no matter the cost. No man left behind. Moving into Season 3, and I think this season might have been the best usage of Donald and Douglas in the whole series. This season, the two really felt like part of the main cast, showing up often, and as their own characters separate from each other. In fact, there is not a single episode this season where the two actually speak words to each other. The phrase, Donald and Douglas, is literally only said once this whole season.
Donald and Douglas will miss their turntable until it is mended.
It's one of those things that you cannot unnotice once you notice it. They are both treated as individuals, and each get their own starring roles apart from each other. Donald got Donald's Duck this year, and Douglas got Escape. Let's talk about Escape. With the missing coach gone now, how does one go about adapting Escape? The two stories are thematically connected. Douglas having escaped Scrap is the whole reason why he was chosen to be the main character of this story, after all. So, what did the show crew do? They wrote a brand new intro to the story. Instead of tying it back to the missing coach, now Trevor is involved, and it's all related back to his story of being saved from Scrap in Season 2. There's actually a lot I like about this. It manages to work Edward into this story now, and it gives him a strong character moment, calling Douglas out on his BS.
Trevor and I are old friends, and you and he have a lot in common too.
And I love this reaction that Douglas has to the word scrap.
We do? Quizzed Douglas. And what would that be? Scrap, said Edward quietly. Douglas gasped. Don't mention that word. It makes me wheels wobble.
Perfectly in character. Now, does this change make the story better? Well, that's a good question. And I think there's merit to both ways that it is presented. No doubt that the original version of the story carries more emotional weight with Douglas returning the favor, but the new opening makes for a better setup in an episode of television. The original story just jumps straight into the action, which is fine for a third story in a book, whereas here, we have some setup and build up to the big escape sequence now. With the missing coach gone, I don't blame the show team at all for this change, and I think that they did the best they could given the circumstances. It does not negate how spectacular of an episode Escape is. It's truly one of the series' best efforts. Following Season 3, the twins fell into the background a bit, much like Edward and Duck did. They were frequent constants, popping up to give their 2 cents on situations or be involved in group scenes. But for the most part, their stories had been told, and so they took a back seat for other characters to get the spotlight. Notably though, Donald got a whole music video dedicated to him in Season 5, revisiting his friendship with his duck, Dilly. Dilly had not been mentioned once since Donald's Duck, nor at all since, so this song feels pretty out of nowhere, but I can't help but love it. The adoration that Donald has for this little fowl is so cute, and it shows that even a hardened Scottish man like him is a bit of a softie. Season 6. I think this is where a turn began. The two returned for their first starring role since Season 3, Twin Trouble, which is a story about the two falling out after an accident.
You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart, huffed Donald. You pulled me, you mean, argued Douglas. Didn't he? Did.
Now, I don't consider this a bad episode or anything. I think having a story where the two are mad at each other is perfectly fine. It's something that they haven't done before this. And I quite like how Duck is worked into it, being this median between the two. But, with this episode, a new precedent was set. From this episode onwards, it's treated as a rule that Donald and Douglas are never seen apart. And when they are apart, they miss each other. But when they are together, they bicker.
And I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, said Douglas. I'm sorry.
The official writer's Bible based on Season 6 even specifically mentions that they are now very codependent, and it would be exceptional to have one included in a scene without the other, and just as exceptional to have only one speaking. If you get Donald, you get Douglas too. I find this a weird place to take them because we've seen in many past episodes that the two work just fine without the other pretty frequently. Seriously, where do they come up with this stuff? They're not a Bill and Ben, for example, where they work in a designated area together and do the same job, where it would make sense for them to appear together all the time. Ironically, around the same time that they started making Donald and Douglas inseparable, Bill and Ben, meanwhile, were starting to be split apart. In the same season, they gave us a solely Bill-focused episode, and later we see Ben appear without Bill a few times in the hit era. Bit of a weird inverse, isn't it? I feel like this simplifies Donald and Douglas too much to a degree. They're brothers, and to really hone that in, it's like they felt they had to always appear together, as if kids would be confused if they only saw one or something. As we'll see later on in the show, this always having Donald and Douglas together will create some limitations with how their characters are used. That being said, later in the season, Percy talks about some of the weird phenomenons that he saw go down at the old mine, and Donald and Douglas explain it away, being naughty gnomes playing tricks on him.
It's the naughty gnomes, teased Donald. We fat men with big feet that make strange things happen, said Douglas. It's legendary.
This is a pretty fun revelation, showing us a more spiritual side to the twins. They believe in the supernatural. This is played with again in Season 7, when one declares belief in a Loch Ness-type monster living in the loch at Callan Castle.
Scared the monster might get ya, teased Douglas. He might, said Donald. There's no monster. There is too.
This was a fun little Loch Ness monster adventure story with the twins. I like the homage to their roots by associating them with the Scottish castle, and there's this nice reveal that they miss Scotland.
But sometimes they long for Scotland, their old home.
Which, I'm sure that's been inferred by everyone. Like, of course they miss their old home, but it's nice to hear it stated at least. We all know that Season 8 is when the big changes happened. Hit Entertainment came in, made all these changes to the show, yada yada. We all know what went down here. Most of the supporting cast just sort of disappeared this season, with no explanation. Donald and Douglas, though, were still kind of around, lurking about, existing, just off screen. They weren't dropped completely like Duck and some others were, which is kind of strange. They got a random out-of-the-blue, out-of-place mention in You Can Do It, Toby.
He shunted coal cars for Henry, and slate cars for Donald. He even shunted fruit and vegetable cars for Douglas.
And they had a whole scene with them filmed for Edward the Great that was cut from the final episode, in which they cheered Edward on during his race with Spencer. They got no appearances in Seasons 9 or 10, only to randomly reappear in Season 11's Gordon and the Engineer, and in fairly prominent roles too. It was a delightful surprise to see them again, aided by the fact that the episode itself is surprisingly good, sticking to real railway practice. It is a story where literally any characters could have been used for their roles, but the fact they opted for more obscure ones like Donald and Douglas instead of like James and Emily or something is really nice. Their final appearance in the model era would be in Season 12's Saved You, where a fallen tree blocks their path. And that's about it. Not that grand of a send-off, but at least we got to see them with CGI faces, albeit only for a few seconds.
We need Harvey!
Donald and Douglas's tenure in the model era of the TV series was consistently kinda bumpy, in my opinion. From the cancellation of their very first episode, to becoming inseparable in Season 6, to their gradual fade into obscurity, and then their brief reemergence towards the end, Donald and Douglas feel like characters that the show occasionally struggled with. I feel they got to a point where they didn't exactly know what to do with them, so they just kind of faded away. But that's not to say that there weren't many highs with them. Season 3 in particular was excellent, with a great adaptation of Escape for Douglas, and the introduction of Donald's pet duck, Dilly, which is something I wish they kept around, even if just as an occasional background gag. One thing that is undeniable about Donald and Douglas and the model series, though, is that their theme music is peak.
The Fat Controller walked towards them. Douglas, with Donald's tender, waited with an innocent expression.
Ah, number 9. And why have you not taken the goods?
My tender is away, sir, so Doogie took it. See?
I see. Some defect, I presume? Now tell me, Why did number 10 leave so quickly?
Maybe, sir. He saw you coming and thought he was late.
Uh-huh. Let me get this straight. Number 10 was shunting the yard. The coach disappeared. We investigate, and you tell me that number 10 disappears too. All the while, your tender has been disconnected. These are the facts, correct?
Aye, sir?
Good. So, Douglas, would you mind telling me why you're masquerading with Donald's tender then?
Needless to say, the Fat Controller couldn't be fooled. After that, Donald and Douglas agreed it best not to play any more tricks, for the Fat Controller was now keeping an even closer eye on them.
So, you're not meant to be here?
Aye, I stowed away here with my brother. I can't abide going back to the mainland.
Why not?
You haven't heard? Yon diesels are taking over. Controllers are cruel. When an engine's turn is up, they don't repair 'em. They put 'em on a cold, damp siding and then cut them up.
Oh dear.
We've got to make a good impression with the Fat Controller, or it's the same fate for Dougie.
What a shame. I wish there was something I could do.
Aye, that's mighty kind, Percy. But what?
The start of the CGI series, as we all know, was kind of bleak. Many seasons went by featuring only its core cast of characters and the occasional new faces. Things picked up in season 17 though, when new writers were brought in and old faces started to return. Jack was the first, then came Duck, then Bill and Ben, and Harvey. Oliver and Toad followed the next season, and so on. It was only a matter of time before the Scottish twins would make their grand reappearance in full CGI. And that day finally came with the 2015 movie, Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. This movie was produced during Thomas's big 70th anniversary year, and so the production team wanted to go all out for it. They wanted all of the main Audrey cast, engines 1 through 11, in it, with speaking lines. And so, finally, Donald and Douglas got their comeback.
Oh, well, I never! Donald and Douglas!
The fact that Duck is the one that reintroduces them is a cheeky little in-joke, paralleling him being the first to interact with them in their first book. The whole exchange here is totally meta. Duck says it's been forever since he's seen them.
Haven't seen you two around in a while.
We only went to collect some more rails and sleepers.
Obviously winking at the audience, who hadn't seen Donald and Douglas for 7 years at this point. The twins' CGI models gave them slight redesigns, now gaining cabs with more indented profiles akin to the real-life A12s, more accurate chimneys, brand new whistle sound effects that are exclusively theirs, and they moved their nameplates back to the sides of their smoke boxes. I'm so happy they did that. I've never really been a big fan of them being in the middle of their boilers starting in Season 3. According to SIF, the team had considered presenting them in their blue livery from the books, but it was shot down from the higher-ups as the black paint is what most people and parents recognize them in. Their roles in the movie are fairly minor, basically just being used as engines to keep transportation of supplies moving to the new branch line. Now, at one time I didn't like this. I thought their comebacks were just pure fan service with no plot relevance, which isn't untrue. But in retrospect, I do like this. The movie isn't about them. The role here is just to keep work going. They are the railway's workhorses, after all. They do, however, feature in one of the movie's finest sequences, when they get the honor of transporting the old pirate ship via rail to the harbor. A mesmerizing sequence. They went so hard on this. Their first major appearance in the CGI series was Season 20's Love Me Tender. And this is just a great episode. Now, I'm stating the obvious here. Everyone has seen this one. It's easily one of the CGI series' best outings. The first Donald and Douglas-centric episode since, Gosh, season 7, wow. There's a lot of things taken from past stories that inspired this one. The twins working back to back to plow snow is consistent with the deputation. And a lot is taken from Twin Trouble. There is no doubt that writer Davey Moore heavily used Season 6's Twin Trouble as a base for this. The plots are very similar, even starting with the same description of the twins.
Donald and Douglas are Scottish twin engines. They're practical, peppery and proud.
Engines 9 and 10 on the Fat Controllers Railway are strong and able workers. They are practical, peppery and proud.
Donald and Douglas are brothers and always work together, until one day they fall out and separate. But one gets into trouble, and when the other finds out, comes to his rescue, and the two make up. They are virtually the same plot, but Love Me Tender excels in its presentation and its little intricacies. The inciting incident here is caused purely by the two of them. It wasn't an out-of-the-blue accident or something that they couldn't control. The coupling here snaps because they couldn't agree with each other. It was totally their own fault. I like that when Donald finds out that he has Douglas's tender and Douglas is stranded, shit gets real, and it becomes a race against the clock to find him. There's a real sense of urgency with the snowfall coming. If Donald doesn't find Douglas soon, he'll be frozen in the snow overnight. You just know that Donald would be out there all night in the blizzard searching for Douglas if he had to. I also like that it switched this time. In Twin Trouble, it was Donald that was in trouble and Douglas came to the rescue. But this time, it's Douglas in trouble, and Donald saves him. The moment when they reunite is so wholesome and relieving. And I think the emotion of it comes down to the great score by Chris Renshaw and the voice acting. Voice actor Joe Mills voiced both twins for their brief scenes in the movie. Starting with this episode, Rob Rackstraw took on Donald, giving each twin their own individual voice.
Shall we stick to the main line or clear the line up to the castle?
I'm saying nothing. You'll choose your own way, whatever I say.
This was a great idea, for it helps separate the two. Two voice actors playing off each other makes banter scenes feel way more natural and real than one guy just doing the voices for both of them. Now, I don't know if this was ad-libbed by them or was part of the script, but I really love how they consistently call each other by nicknames now. Donald always refers to Douglas affectionately as Doogie, as he did on occasion in the past, and Douglas now refers to him as Donnie, which is new. That's just such a cute little trait, and it really helps solidify that these two are brothers. Also gotta love how their drivers are notably Scottish now too.
This is really good cocoa.
Keeping that consistency with the books.
Can we know, said Douglas's driver. They're all for us. See for yourself.
That's a little quirk that they did not have to add here, but did it anyway. Love that attention to detail. I do take some issues with the set design in this episode. I really don't like the junction that they chose for where Douglas's coupling snaps. It's totally flat and open, making it unbelievable that Donald somehow missed Douglas here when he passed looking for him.
Over here!
He's literally in plain sight of you. How do you not see him? A different set where Douglas's sighting ends in bushes or curves away around a bend away from the main line to obscure him from view or something would have been better. All in all though, Love Me Tender is fantastic. It's the definitive Donald and Douglas Fallout story, in my opinion. It embraces what their book in the Railway series was all about. There's nothing more important than your family. You do what you can to save those you love, no matter the risk. Either we both win, or we both go down trying.
But no matter how many times they fall out, Donald and Douglas always get back together again.
To our delight, we found out Donald and Douglas would be getting another Spotlight episode in the very next season. They did the brothers argue and fall out thing with them, and they did it really well, so we all wondered what aspect they would utilize next. Davey Moore did really well exploring the characters of the other returnees, notably Daisy, who was reintroduced at the same time as them, and he managed to get multiple episodes out of her. Would he do something relating to the infamous cancelled missing coach story? Maybe we'd get something regarding the Scottish castle again and pay some homage to the characters' roots? How about something with their beliefs in the supernatural? A ghostly Halloween story, perhaps? Ooh, maybe Dilly would come back into the fold and they do something with her. You know, a story with an animal. The CGI series loved that crap. Or would it be something totally new and different that we haven't seen before? The possibilities seem endless. So, what did they do? Oh, it's just the same thing they did last time. The brothers argue and fall out. Again. Oh. The episode is Season 21's Emily in the Middle, and I think this is where people started turning on the twins, for they just did pretty much the same thing again. It even takes place in winter, in the snow, just like last time. The setting isn't even that different. I think why Love Me Tender worked so well was because Donald and Douglas arguing and having a fallout was the point of that story. It wasn't implied that this happens all the time. It was just a big argument they got into that ballooned, and it all came together so beautifully at the end because Donald dropped everything to go help his brother. It was sweet, it was heartfelt, it had a warm, cozy message about the importance of family. Emily in the Middle just has them argue because that's apparently all they do now, because that's their shtick, apparently.
They can't agree with each other, let alone another engine.
I get it to an extent. At this point in the show, there were so many freaking characters, and they likely wanted to give the twins a shtick that sort of made them stand out. Now they get very heated, and they bicker and argue all the time. I mean, that was definitely part of their characters in the past, but it comes off like they didn't really know what else to do with them besides this. It's one of those pitfalls that comes from making the two inseparable. It's very limiting what you can do with two engines that work together all the time. How do we add drama to a story about them? We make them argue, I guess. I don't even dislike this episode, to be honest. I think working Emily into it made for a fun character mashup, pairing the twins up with a character that they have literally never ever been seen interacting with prior. The three Scottish engines all in one episode. That's fun. And I think Donald and Douglas themselves are very funny here.
I'm no going any further.
You what?
I said I'm no going any further.
You what?
Oh, brother.
But it just doesn't hit as hard as Love Me Tender did. The arguing shtick just feels a bit tired now. If this was just one of many Donald and Douglas episodes that didn't feature this same shtick, I don't think anyone would have a problem with this one. But therein lies the problem. For these two episodes are the twins' only major appearances in the whole CGI era. They would get the rare cameo here and there, seen in the background at Vickerstown or Knapford, just being your typical workhorses. But once Big World Big Adventure started, they were just flat out dropped again. I think Donald and Douglas suffered in CGI purely from a lack of exposure. They just weren't in this era of the show long enough for the writers to really find their footing with them. They had this one shtick down, and they never really went beyond that. I don't dislike the twins in CGI or anything. There's actually a lot of little elements about them here that I like quite a bit. Their voices, for one. I think they're just perfect.
Why? I can hear yous two laughing away, ha ha ha.
But they are a far cry from the old days where each had their own personality and could carry stories apart from each other. I only wish that we got to see more of them. It has now been 7 years since we last saw Donald and Douglas. The same amount of time before their big return in the CGI series. Isn't that crazy to think about? God, I'm so old. But according to that toy leak, they will be appearing in All Engines Go. I have not kept up with that show at all, but this reveal was a total shocker to me. I cannot believe Donald and Douglas are actually coming back into the public consciousness again. But as for the three previous eras, which do I personally think they were the best in? Oh, you all know the answer. It's without a doubt the Railway series. It's all the little intricacies with their characters that make them so wonderful in the books. You got Douglas's stowaway arc and later returning the favor. The subtle arc of them getting over their prejudice of diesels. The long desire to be painted blue and getting that wish fulfilled. Getting engines of all classes to come together and sing a song with them. Hell, even their distinctive, consistently whiskery, unkempt eyebrows. Everything about Donald and Douglas is so oozing with character. And while I think the TV series sometimes fumbled them in its many eras, I can't say that I dislike any version of the twins. There's something to love in all these different takes from over the years. But no matter the take, all three embody what make Donald and Douglas so special in this franchise. They are brothers through and through, and nothing is more important than family. Either they both will win, or they both will go down trying.
Snow came early that year, and it was heavier than usual. Most engines hate snow, but Donald and Douglas were used to it. Coupled back to back with a van between their tenders and their snowplough on their fronts, they set to work clearing the lines.
Snowdrift ahead, Donny! Full steam!
But even their good work in the snow wasn't enough to brighten their spirits. The Fat Controller would be returning soon with his decision.
He'll send Dougie back for sure.
It is a shame. They'll cut him up if he goes back.
And that won't do. Surely one of us should be able to think of something.
They all thought hard, but none knew what. But one morning, Percy came rushing into the yard.
Everyone, I've got it! Edward says we need a depot station.
Of course, a dissertation. But the question is...
what is a desperation?
It's when someone tells the Fat Controller something's wrong and ask him to put it right.
Did you say tell the Fat Controller?
Yes.
So, who's going to do it then?
Henry?
Oh, no. I certainly can't.
Donald?
Nope, can't be one of us.
Maybe Gordon.
I propose that Percy be our disputation.
Me? What? I can't.
Oh, rubbish, Percy, it's easy.
Well, that's settled then. Off you go, Percy.
Bye-bye.
But, fine. I really don't like this.
Well, hello, Percy.
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
You seem nervous, Percy. What's the matter?
Please, sir. They've made me a desperation, sir, to speak to you, sir. I don't like it, sir.
Do you mean a deputation, Percy?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. It's about Donald and Douglas, sir. They say, sir, that if you send one away, sir, they'll be turned into scrap, sir. That would be dreadful, sir. Please, sir, don't send them away.
Okay.
They're nice engines, sir.
Okay, thank you, Percy. That'll do.
Yes, sir.
The next day, the Fat Controller came to see the engines.
So, I had a deputation yesterday. I understand all your feelings, but I do not approve of interference.
Oh.
Donald and Douglas.
Yes, sir.
Aye, sir.
I hear your work in the snow has been good. Well done. For that, you both deserve new coats of paint. What colour would you like?
Blue, sir, please.
Very well. But your names will be placed on you. We will have no more masquerading.
Thank you, sir.
Does this mean that both of us?
What it means is...
No one knew what the Fat Controller said after that, for the rest of his speech was drowned in a chorus of cheers and whistles. Donald and Douglas are practical, peppery and proud. They can tackle any job given to them and always do so without complaint. And it's for that reason that the Fat Controller never regretted his decision to keep numbers 9 and 10 on his railway.
Sticking with the theme of Donald and Douglas here, I'd like to recommend The Missing Coach by Sooty Will. This has got to be one of the most unique and entertaining takes on this story that I have ever seen, adding in all these new elements and plot details, and bringing some other characters into the fold too, and all filmed with models. It is a very entertaining watch, and it really shows that Sooty had a lot of fun making this. If you need just a bit more of a Donald and Douglas fill, go give this a watch. This video would not have been possible without the incredibly talented voice actors behind the characters here. Yes, that was the Joe Mills voicing Douglas, the voice of Douglas, Oliver, and Toad from the actual Thomas and Friends. I cannot tell you all how happy I was when he agreed to work on this project. And he delivered. It is so surreal hearing the CGI Douglas say lines from the Railway series. Thank you so much for taking part in this, Joe. I think a lot of people are going to be so happy to hear your voice again. Donald was voiced by J.P. Wright, who nailed the Scottish accent. I loved his take on Donald here. It's so much deeper and different than Douglas's, which is great. It makes each one stand apart from each other. Thank you for taking on the role, JP. You killed it. And of course, a big thank you to the rest of the cast, who are all returning cast members. Richard Browning as Gordon, who never misses. Robin Edwards as both Thomas and Percy this time. Got to voice both in the same project for once. Kyle, aka Trampy, as the Inspector and Henry. And Tom Marshall as Duck and our narrator. You all totally nailed it. Always love your performances. And last, but certainly not least, Isaiah, or One Tram Band, my go-to guy for music. He took this project on and ran with it. The score he put together here is so fun, blending all these different themes from various eras of the show into one, and it all sounding so cohesive. Again, I know nothing about music, so hearing all of it come together just blows my mind. Just like with Edward's Saga, I will do an upload of just the uncut score, so you all can hear it in its full glory. I got a lot of comments before on Edward's video, asking if it was alright with people remaking Edward's Saga in Roblox, trains, etc. And the answer to that is yes, absolutely you can. I love seeing others' takes on my stuff. Feel free to remake Edward's Saga and the Twin Engines or any of the Sodor's Finest segments all you like. I'd love to see what you all come up with. The Twin Engines will be up as its own video very soon, so maybe wait for that to come out, because it will have a little extra content that wasn't in this upload. I'd like to take a moment to talk about our narrator, Tom Marshall, and his shop, Buggles Kelly Station. Tom produces several buildings, accessories, and rolling stock for model railways in all scales. A lot of it is pop culture related, so plenty of Railway series and Thomas stuff here. I was, very gratefully, sent a couple of his buildings. This mountain house, as seen in the episode Bulldog, and the barber shop from A Close Shave, post-crash. These prints are so high quality and so detailed. They don't feel like that they would break if I were to drop them by accident. I will give you all a closer look at these in my next layout video, but I can highly recommend them. If you're in the market for some model railway buildings like these, go check out what Buggles Kelly Station has to offer. Use the code TUG10 at checkout and get 10% off your purchase. Link is below in the description. Thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great day all, and I will see you all in the next one.